Hello there. I am so excited to chat with you about bringing talent back to the workplace. So, I have a question for you. What are some words you would use to describe the hiring environment over the last 2 to 3 years? If you don't mind dropping that in the chat box, what words would you use to describe the hiring environment over the last 2 or 3 years? As I wait for your comments, some of the ones I've heard so far over this past year are chaotic, stressful, um, let's see, empty. Are some words I've heard to describe the hiring environment. I would love your input and I will keep looking for it even as we move on to our next slide in 3, 2, 1. So I would like you to consider your employees as an incubator of sorts. And to that end, whatever you deposit there grows and expands. So your internal culture equals your employee experience, and your employee experience equals your client experience. So let's talk about that culture. 2 years ago, there was a viral burnout in the workplace, and it was nicknamed the Great Resignation, right? But I disagree. I feel like I argue that there was more of a great awakening, a collective experience of sorts, where when the world was on fire, so many employees realized their employers did not care that much about them. And so it caused them to start, reconsidering and analyzing. Two-thirds of the workforce began to analyze their dreams and their purpose and, their chosen career paths. And consequently, at the end of 2021, it ended with the largest mass exodus from the workforce in history. So many employers, however, got stuck on the fact that they left, that they really didn't take the time to study why they left. They didn't leave just for better pay, they left for a better work culture. So, what is culture? Culture is the values, behaviors, habits, and perceptions shared by a group of people. And each of these builds on each other. So, values feed into behavior, behavior feeds into habits, habits feed into perception. So, to that end, if I polled your employees or your nannies, what would they say they love about working with your agency? What words would they use to describe your work culture? And what would they say that your agency or you as a leader, you do really, really well? So I'm going to give you a moment if you wouldn't mind sharing that in the chat box. How would your employees describe your work culture, and what would they say you do really, really well? What's your jam? What's that thing that they come to you for because you do it better than anyone else? I would love it if you would continue to put your input in the chat box, even again, as we move on to the next slide in 3, 2, and 1. So one of the things that Beehive PR said is that employees are expecting more. Just generally speaking, they're expecting more authenticity, more transparency, a phenomenal work culture that empowers them to deliver a really great client-centered experience. So how do we attract and retain talent? We put people first. We release toxic stereotypes. We become what we seek. We know what drives burnout, and we develop a strong internal culture. So let's get into it. People first. You must be committed to developing people. In order to develop people, you have to understand what drives them and what really matters to them. In 2022, Gallup poll, they released a poll on what people were seeking in their new employment opportunities, right? And these were the 6 things that came up the most often. So what would you think would be number one? What's the first thing at the top of that list? Anybody? If you said better pay, you would be correct. 64% of those polled said that they were leaving and looking for better pay. The second thing that they were looking for was a better or improved work-life balance. They are looking for greater work-life balance and well-being. 61% of those polled were looking for better well-being in their work environment, because all of the polls over the last several years really reflect a workforce that is burnt out, and tired and overwhelmed and generally just haggard, right? They have had a hard time of it, and they are seeking a work environment that doesn't just care about self-care, but they create an environment that advocates for it and creates a space for well-being, right? Some of the things that you see on your screen here are just some things that we can implement in our agencies, or we can advocate for in our work agreements or with clients that would provide a path to better and improved well-being. Next, they're looking for a job that will play to their strengths. The ability to work with someone that understands what excites each and every candidate and works to place them in a position that plays to those strengths. Next, they're looking for job security, right? They want felt safety over said safety. And then lastly, they're looking for COVID-19 policies. Now, wherever you fall on the spectrum really doesn't matter. What they're looking for is for you to communicate that so that they can make an informed decision and align themselves with agencies that are like-minded. Lastly, they're looking for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and for people who prioritize those deliverables. This can be a two-edged sword. So I do want to put this in there, that because you can do significant damage to your brand and to your ability to attract talent if you start touting ideals and priorities that your actions don't substantiate, right? And so organizations that are not authentically delivering on DEI efforts need to be transparent about that and invest time in those efforts while still being transparent about their shortcomings, okay? Next, number 2, release toxic and outdated stereotypes. Here's a few on the screen: self-sacrifice, gender norms, age norms, and the side hustle. So self-sacrifice is this idea that you must be willing to be a martyr and give your left lung for your job, right? So give up all of your time, all of your hobbies, all of your personhood just to be successful. We have to let that go. Gender norms, this idea that women are warm and nurturing and likable and men are overpowering, assertive, and more active. We have to let those things go. Did you know that women are more represented in occupations that are characterized by high warmth but low competence? I think that's something we should work to overturn in 2023. Age norms, this idea that if they're younger, they're fickle, naive, and incompetent, but if they're older, they're mature and well-educated. Listen, I have met more ratchet aged people than I care to remember. And so we really have to let these types of ideals and toxic and outdated stereotypes go. And then the side hustle. Did you know that over 35% of employees have a side hustle? And you attempting to stifle this says that your company is threatened by innovation, by entrepreneurs, and by creatives. Instead, you should be encouraging people to pursue their passions and engage in their interests. Next, become what you seek. I have another question for you. What are the characteristics of a great nanny, or a great household manager, or a great NCS? Would you drop those in the chat box for me? What are the characteristics of a great nanny? I'll go first. I would say being personable, professional, professional. That's not even a word. How about having a good vocabulary? Being professional, personable, innovative, creative, having integrity, someone that has drive and resilience. These are characteristics to me of a great nanny, someone that is warm and inviting and engaging. I'd love to continue to get your input. Most curious, innovative, creative, driven, communicative employees are looking for employers that reflect the same characteristics and the same competencies. And more importantly, what they want to know, if their head, if their leader, if the head of the company has these same characteristics or ideals. If your employees, and they are required to be warm and engaging and inviting with complete strangers, right? So we ask our nannies to go into these interviews and knock it out of the park, right? Be chatty, be personable, be professional, be someone can respect, all these things. Warm, inviting, and engaging. We're expecting them to do this with people that they've never even met in person. But if we were to ask people that have met us at conferences, in meetings, served with us on boards, and just run into us in the community, would they also say that we are warm, engaging, and inviting? Often we are consistent consistently requiring of others what we are unwilling or unable to do consistently ourselves. This level of hypocrisy is a turnoff to new hires and recruits. Next, we want to know and kind of get educated on what is driving burnout. According to the World Health Organization, burnout is exhaustion or cynicism toward one's job that results in reduced job performance. The consequences of burnout are extensive, and the consequences for our clients include anything from reduced client satisfaction to compromised safety and an increase in adverse events. Burnout is directly associated with a reduction in compassion and care. This should bother all of us because our entire industry is built on the pillars of compassion and care. And so nannies who are experiencing burnout are more likely to have clients who believe that they've had a lower quality of care. And ultimately, this will affect your client loyalty and your bottom line. There are three components of burnout: emotional exhaustion, a low sense of personal accomplishment, and depersonalization. Emotional exhaustion is going to show up as frustration and tension. A low sense of personal accomplishment is going to manifest itself in ineffectiveness and incompetence. And depersonalization will manifest as cynicism and distance. We should know these things and we should be on the lookout for them. Triggers, what drives it, what triggers burnout is all the things that you see on your screen. A lack of control, so the inability to influence the decisions that affect your job, whether it's your schedule, your workload, your assignments, all of these things can lead to or be a trigger for burnout. Even not having the resources to do your job effectively can do that. Unclear job expectations. If you're unclear about the degree of authority you have in a room, that can trigger burnout. This is something that we can do something about as business owners by providing very, very clear expectations and coaching parents on how to do so as well. Dysfunctional workplace dynamics. Placing our nannies in positions with people who are bullies, right, can contribute to stress. I would think so. Extremes in activity levels, having days where it's extremely chaotic and days where nothing happens, it's completely mundane and there's nothing, so monotonous. We should be mindful of that. That extreme up and down can trigger stress and drive burnout. A lack of social support, feeling isolated in what you do and in your work life and your personal life can lead to a person being more stressed and ultimately lead to burnout. Poor work-life balance. When your work takes up so much of your time that you don't have time to invest in your relationships and with your friends or even energy to spend on yourself, it's a straight path to burnout. Management, again, this is where it's reflected on us, having people over them, right, who are either uneducated and unknowledgeable on the things that they have to do, having insufficient training, right? So feeling like they don't have someone who is willing to give them the resources that they need to be successful, someone who is managing them with a lack of empathy and compassion, a focus on money rather than care. These types of things lead to burnout. And work and personal circumstances, anything from pressure on their job to a lack of time to consider changes. So a family is looking to make a decision that could impact this nanny for the next 9 months, but she has literally all of 90 minutes to make a decision. That's stressful. Job insecurity, a lack of support at home, your home life, unprocessed trauma. And for women, hormonal changes that are happening monthly. Amen. These things can cause stress. They can ultimately lead to burnout. How can we prevent these things? How can we prevent burnout? By being mindful, by being well educated on these triggers and putting things in place that help to offset that. What you see is not an exhaustive list on your screen, but it's just something that where we can jump into a good place to get started, or a few of the things that you see on your screen. And lastly, developing a strong internal culture. This is my jam. I've been waiting this entire presentation to get to this point because developing a strong internal culture is what I love. It's my jam. It's what I enjoy. So how do you develop this? You want to have self-aware leadership, right? A purpose and value system that magnetizes recruits who are like-minded. Your mission should make them feel like they're doing something that's important and valuable. And you want to make sure that your mission aligns with their expectations and values. So besides a job, that person picked your particular agency because they too value what? Right? Many people pick my agency because we value education. And so if they are a person who is like-minded, they will do well in our agency. You want to authentically recognize them as well. But before I get to that, I'm gonna also say you want to be relevant. It's really important that you not have your head in the sand and be so out of touch with what's happening in your community that you can make no difference. Talent in this employment landscape is looking for agencies that are relevant, that are plugged into what's happening in the world around them and have an opinion on it, whatever that opinion may be. They want people who are courageous enough to take a stand on societal issues, whether that's climate change, racial issues, anything like that. They want someone who is plugged in and willing to take a stand. Next, let's move on to empowering your employees. So having autonomy or cultivating autonomy. When your culture, your vision, and your mission is clearly communicated and threaded, the key word being threaded, throughout your company, your employees and your team members feel that they're empowered, like they can make decisions that will naturally align with those ideals. Threaded is the key word. It should be in literally every aspect of your company from start to finish. You want to recognize their efforts in a real and genuine way. This is why it's important that you know who you're working with. You shouting Teresa out on Facebook may not matter to her at all because she's not even on Facebook and she could care less about you shouting her out and putting her picture on Facebook. And so you should know the love language of the people that you're working with so that you can recognize them in ways that feel valuable to them. If they don't value it, then it's not valuable to them. And so they could care less. You want to make sure that you're able to have an open dialogue and that it's easy to not only give feedback, but to receive feedback. To that end, you should be able to be told about yourself. If you can't receive feedback, you shouldn't be so froggy about giving feedback, right? And you want to find lots of different avenues to receive and give feedback. So I want you to think outside of just your quarterly and your annual or biannual review. You want to have ongoing platforms and conversations and so many avenues for them to communicate with you so that way it's easy for you to give feedback. This is important because it helps it to be when you never talk to someone, like I never talked to Mary, then when I show up to give Mary this negative or this critical feedback that we receive from her client, it feels some kind of way, right? It feels like a strong aggressive thing has happened to Mary because she hasn't heard from me at all. But when I have an ongoing conversation with Mary, when I'm checking in to see how she's doing, or she's hearing from our teams all the time, or our team members all the time, or we heard that, she had a death in her family and someone called to check on that, then when we have to give this critical feedback, it's a little bit more easily received because she feels like we care about her. We've been talking to Mary, and we didn't just start talking to Mary when we had something negative to say, right? And so you want to make sure that it's easy to give feedback, easy for you to receive feedback. So, and when it comes to receiving feedback, you want to allow it to be anonymous. Everybody shouldn't have to give you their whole face to give you feedback. Allow it to be anonymous. Allow other people to receive it on your behalf. Do it in small groups. Make it regular. Follow through. You want to give honest feedback, and you want to be considerate in how you deliver that. Next, you want to consider enabling them to serve a greater purpose. What do you do in your community? Do you volunteer at all? Do you provide opportunities for your team members to volunteer or to be plugged in? Good things happen when we give to other people. And so when we provide avenues for our nannies and our team members to be plugged into the community, to volunteer and to give back, that makes them feel good. And they tie that good feeling to your agency. And so enabling them to serve a greater purpose through any of the things you see on your screen, those are just a few ideas, could be something that could be really valuable to your nanny. But ultimately, we are in the community. We shouldn't just be taking from the community. We should all be found giving back to our communities. What you see on your screen are a few images from some of the things that we've done to build a strong internal culture with my agency, E-Nanny. We try to find things that are both educational and fun. So we did a self-defense class where we all got our butts kicked by this jiu-jitsu master. It was wonderful. I ended up with bruises, but I'm well informed. We've done yoga classes, just whatever works for you. But we do life together. And so our nannies hopefully feel very, very supported in life. Building a strong internal culture, you want to provide professional development opportunities. Again, my whole soapbox. You want to intentionally develop talent, including more opportunities for training and meeting time when possible. I can't say this enough, and I really don't know how to more strongly advocate for this than the ways that I do, but It's so important that your nannies see you as a conduit of information and education. You should be providing professional development opportunities all the time. It is so easy to jump online and to find any online course to give you some certification in any one thing, right? And so that should not be the goal or the game changer, right? What you need to be found doing, or what I encourage you to do, is to consider offering things consistently. Your consistent offerings are the things that validate you. It's what gives you street cred with your agency, right? So it's not that I say I value education and I give you this one-off class every 9 months. It's I value education. Our team at E-Nanny is trained every other month. They have been trained bi-monthly for the last 9, almost 10 years now. And on those off months where we're not meeting formally, there is an opportunity for informal training. This is something we've been doing for a long time. We have never missed a date. We have never rescheduled a date. They know come hell or high water, this is happening. And that consistency is what gives you street cred. That consistency is what puts a little bit of validation, a little bit more respect on your name, right? Because when you say to them, it's really important that you be educated, it's really important that you be professional, they know that not only are you requiring this of them, but that you are also committed to providing the avenues for them to achieve that. So encouraging mentorship connections, creating onboarding, having professional development programs, lots of virtual training options, in-person sessions, all of these types of things are absolutely imperative in your agency. And if they are not things that you've plugged into yet, then you should be. Now, I will put this caveat out there. If training is not your jam, you should go find someone for whom it is their jam. We've all had teachers who were really lovely, lovely individuals, but who were not gifted in teaching. That was not their gift that the Lord deposited within them. And so it's really important that in developing professional development opportunities, that you find people for whom that is their jam, that is their purpose, that is what they were called to do, because how you present this information and people feeling like that was an enjoyable experience is important, right? And so if that's not your jam, then you should contract with someone for whom it is their jam. Next, you want to engage through communication and open dialogue. It's very important, like I said before, that you have lots of ways for your team to talk to you. If you can never be reached, I have to go through 7 assistants and make a coffee date to meet with you. I'm less likely to want to work with you because you can't be found anywhere. And that makes me feel like you're not really invested in my success as a team member. You want to have lots of opportunities for communication and open dialogue. In our agency, we had so many things. We had a weekly rant forum where they could talk about anything that ticked them off with no negative repercussions at all, right? So they could talk about their clients, they could talk about their kids, they could talk about their husband, they could talk about anything. And they just went for broke. This was only one day of a day out of the week, but they got this opportunity to talk about things. And then the other team members would give them advice. They would chat with them. As an agency owner, there's no bad sides to this for you. I hope you know that. This was a wonderful thing. We did this for probably about 6-7 years. We had our rant day every Wednesday. This was so beneficial. Why was it beneficial, Erica? I'm glad you asked. It was beneficial because it became an informal way for us to see who we were working with. It became an informal way for us to assess our team. So if I see that Mallory has the same complaints about her employers, and even across multiple employers, she's always talking about discipline, she's always talking about X, Y, and Z, then Mallory is probably not great at establishing discipline in a home or creating types of boundaries with children. I know that that's a sore spot for her. So I wouldn't place her with children for whom they're going to challenge her strongly in that area. If I see that Tara is always giving horrible feedback, she gives really bad advice, I'm going to realize that Tara has some deficiencies in her education and in her base of knowledge, and that's going to need to be addressed before I send her somewhere. It helps me to know who is well versed in certain things versus who needs support. It's a wonderful thing. And all of these types of things, from conversation starters, what did you do over the weekend, what's the best book you read this week, to growth groups, to play dates, all of these things can only benefit you. You also want to have an internal communication platform, ways for your team to talk with each other and with you. All of these types of platforms that you see on here are great options to consider if you don't have one already. And once you have this internal communication hub in place, you want to stay relevant and be concise. Once a nanny has given you an in to communicate with them, you can send push notifications to them and all this jazz. Don't don't spam them with stuff. They're going to completely delete that app and cut you off, right? When they have given you this way to communicate with them at will, you want to respect that. And you want to be mindful of that. So you want to make sure that you're only presenting information that is relevant, something that has to be said, and something that's going to be valuable to them, so that they realize that you respect this avenue that they've given you to communicate with them. I was preparing this presentation in the summer of 2022. And when I was in this process, one of our nannies got a job that she was really seeking. She had been with us a while, and she made this Facebook post. I decided to include it here because as I was preparing this presentation, I felt like it really, for me, at least as a business owner, helped to underscore the value of what we've been spending all this time doing, developing a strong internal culture. So she says this, okay, so I'm going to get a little bit mushy for a minute. I've been with E-Nanny for about 6 years now, if I'm remembering correctly. And through that time, I've grown a lot as a human. I've learned that I had a lot of healing to do from childhood trauma and the side effects, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, low confidence, etc., of having dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, and am potentially autistic. While being with E-Nanny, I've been able to gain the knowledge I needed to do better for me and heal. I gained the tools to understand why I felt the way I did. I did enough to pass, but no more to avoid being seen. The anxiety was too much, but now I am confidently going for jobs I would have been too afraid to go for before. I'm an advisor for other nannies, and numerous nannies on up in the company affirm my abilities regularly. I never even imagined being any type of or any kind of authority in a field, but here I am, being called a newborn care specialist and being sought after for interviews, and having others meet me and say things like, "So you're the famous Annie that keeps getting mentioned in the chat and at meetings." It blows my mind. I do want to say that this is not to show off. I genuinely think everyone should be treated this way and feel this way in their career. And I believe to my core, had I gone the same route as a nanny, but not through E-Nanny, I wouldn't have made it anywhere. I wouldn't have gained the skills I did, and I wouldn't be proud of myself like I am now. Find companies that want to pour into you so that you can grow. Find companies that want you because you've got potential and they see it and want to invest in it. So how do you attract and retain talent? Put people first, release toxic stereotypes, become what you seek, know what drives burnout, and develop a strong internal culture. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm open for any questions you may have. All righty, so we are going to answer the questions that have been coming in through the chat on Whova. So someone asked, how would you professionally tell someone that their rate doesn't match their presented qualifications and resume? That's a great question. I typically do so through stats. I find sometimes when dealing with things that could seem very personal, that when you find things that are objective in nature, numbers, stats, things like that, it really helps to offset that feeling, not completely, but quite a bit. So I would just say, in comparison with other individuals with your similar skill set, abilities, educations, and qualifications, they typically fall within this range and this range. Nannies who are in the range that you are asking for typically come with these skills, qualification, education, certifications, or experiences. And so we don't find you to be on par with other nannies that we've seen who are in this pay grade, so forth and so on. And then we would continue that conversation. We would obviously ask or offer to help. So we wouldn't just tell them that, they're ratchet. We would let them know that they don't fall or match their presented qualifications or resume, but then we would provide opportunities for them to grow in that area, or for them to get new certifications or other experience that could help to boost their qualifications or boost their experiences so that they can arrive at the pay range that they are clearly looking for. Another question is it customary to let a family know right off the bat that they most likely won't be able to attract an experienced nanny unless they are willing to pay more and be more liberal with benefits? Yeah, Absolutely. Listen, I'm a proponent of direct communication, assertive communication, and emotionally intelligent communication. It's what I give out, it's what I expect from my team, and it's what I expect from my clients. And so I help to cultivate that because that's what I give. So I give that high level of expectation that that's what I would expect you to give me back. So if a client is coming and their pay rate or their benefits are below what they're looking for, this really, really awesome outcome, I specifically say you are more than welcome. You're well within your rights to post this position or to ask us to vet for it within this range. However, given our experience in this field and what's been happening currently in this current economic state, this pay range and benefit package falls below our probability or below the level of probability of success. So it has a low probability of success, and it's so low that it's not quite something that we're comfortable dealing with unless we were to change these things. Or if we're going to deal with it, we'll say we'll be more than happy to post it for you or more than happy to vet for it, but it does fall below the threshold that we're generally comfortable dealing with. And so we would assume that it would have a low probability of success. Now, you are more than welcome to continue with this. We will absolutely do our best, but we just want you to be aware that in similar situations with similar types of rates and benefits and hours and structure, we have not found this to deliver on the type of candidate that you're saying that you would want. Is there something that we can tweak in this position? Is there a different way that we can structure the position so that you get what you're looking for and it attracts the types of candidates that you said that you want? So yeah, I think open communication is what we have to be about. Listen, parents come to us because they're expecting that you are the expert in that given field. If you're not going to tell them what's going to help them or what could be hurting them, then I feel like we really can't be in this position. They're asking for that, whether they know it or not. And we have to be found delivering on that level of honesty. When do you draw the line of people being fake to retain nannies or NCSs and clients compared to being authentic, real, and having integrity? I mean, the line was drawn before I began the interaction. I am not a proponent of us being inauthentic in any way. To retain any person, whether it be a member of your admin staff, a member of your nanny staff, or a client. At the end of the day, anything that you have to put on, eventually you will have to take off. If it is not who you absolutely are within the core and the fiber of your being, it will have to come off, just like a big coat in the summer. Eventually you're going to get hot and you will have to take that off. And if you are putting on something or being fake to retain someone, eventually it's going to come out. And that person, whether it is your client or your nanny or a member of your staff, is going to really feel duped, like they've been tricked in thinking that you were this type of person when you weren't. So I don't think that there is any benefit in pretending to be something that you're not for any purpose, whether it's to retain someone, to make more money, or anything. I think that you only win when you are authentic and honest and walk in integrity. Is there a platform you utilize for or recommend for anonymous communications to give feedback anonymously? Yeah, you can use Jot forms, you can use all kinds of type forms, you can use Google Docs, you can have subgroups. So when you meet in person or when you have trainings, you can allow them to do surveys and polls and things like that that don't have to have an assigned thing. You can also just ask, give open feedback forms that don't even have a place for a name. They just check, they just rate things. Anything like that that is a little bit more objective. Even sometimes for people who are really hesitant to give feedback, even having just the open spaces where they have to give comments can feel overwhelming. So you should have high-level responsive inputs, so where you have those open spaces and they can give direct feedback, but then you should also consider having forms or things like that, or platforms where they can just rate things on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or a not so great to great, so that it's a little bit more objective. It doesn't feel as personal. And for those who are really conflict averse, they can feel a bit more comfortable giving that type of feedback to you. I'd also suggest having people as a mediation or a mediary between you and the person that needs to give the feedback. Sometimes it doesn't matter how you give it. The fact that it's you giving it is the problem. And so having someone else who maybe doesn't seem as high up in the company, or another nanny that administers these forms, could be a little bit easier. It can make it easier for someone to give honest feedback. At the end of the day, we don't just want feedback. We want honest feedback. And so I would also highly suggest reaching out to nannies who didn't come on with your company. Reaching out to nannies who you've heard through the grapevine are bad mouthing you, reaching out to clients who chose to go a different direction than to finish that process with your agency. There have been several times that I've called a client who decided to decline our services, asked if I could either pay for them to have a cup of coffee or send them a gift card or take them out to lunch in exchange for them telling me all the things about our process that turned them off from that process, or things that they feel like we could have done better, or if they were running it, what they would have done, or what they were looking for when they came into it that they didn't feel came up to their expectation. The same thing for a nanny. Like, what did irritate you about this process? What was your pain point going through this process? And you get more honest feedback from people who are pissed at you than you generally get from people who like you. And so sometimes that's a better way to go if you're really looking for honest feedback. And because everybody who's your yes people will continue to say yes, sometimes you need to tap into your nose so that you can get a little bit more transparency. Let's see. Someone else says that they are well into human design. She's super intuitive, and with those two, she can spot talent very well as know what each party needs are very quickly to know if they would work well or not. That's wonderful to hear. I think it's really important that we know what our skill sets are, really use that discernment. I have another comment talking about how we advocate for training. I think it's exactly what Sue spoke on. I feel like this really speaks well to what she was just talking about. It really has to be threaded all the way through. So communicating with your clients to let them know that this training is going on, letting them know well in advance. So for our agency, we put out a schedule of our trainings in November. So it'll be in November of this year for 2024. It was in November of 2022 for 2023. Nobody likes to be surprised. I heard a saying that said, surprised people are angry people. And so if you let them know in advance, this is what we're putting out. Your nanny has access to these trainings. These are the subject matter that we'll be covering through this year. This is why it's beneficial to you, so forth and so on. But honestly, I find that threading it again throughout every process that you have, if that is your thing, if education is something that you're passionate about, there should be not a single person that made it through your doors of your agency that did not find out that you were passionate about education. So from onboarding with your nannies, them knowing that that's something that you value, to onboarding with a client, letting them know our ideal clients are people for whom they are proponents of ongoing professional development, and really threading that through so that it's not a surprise, and that you've already been touting the benefits of these types of programs and they don't have to outsource it. You are there providing it, whether it's a quarterly thing or twice a year or however you provide it, doing that. And then incentivizing your nannies to be there, incentivizing your clients to allow your nannies to be there by shouting them out, letting them know, hey, congrats to you for having such an amazing nanny that attended a training on her off day. I just want to let you know that you really, hit the ball out of the field when you hired someone who was so dedicated to your family that they would take the time to continue to be trained to be better for your children and your family. So another question that I have in side chat is about how what platforms do we use for training. We do in-person training personally, and then we do online training as well. So virtual opportunities as well as in-person opportunities. Again, I think that what Sue spoke to is so timely, because integrating both an educational component and a social component is really where you're going to find the biggest bang for your buck. And so making sure that it's not just bang, 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 but that you are giving them educational content while also feeding into their natural need to socialize with other people in the same industry, to get advice from someone other than you, to allow other nannies to advise other nannies and to speak to other nannies and to eat with other nannies and to do activities with other nannies is really important. We do in-person trainings. We offer virtual trainings every other month. We have toolkits that we use, which are just short bite-sized videos that we use to mediate certain behaviors when we don't have time for a team member to always call, or we find that this is an issue that keeps coming up. We found these things to be beneficial to help our team just always be comfortable receiving feedback, always be comfortable receiving educational content, because that's something that's kind of bred into every component of what we do. And I think that was all. Let me make sure I haven't missed any other questions. Blah, 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 blah. No, I think that's it. So listen, you guys are going to get a break. You got done early. Congratulations to you. So now you're going to have about 22 minutes for a bio break, to jump into Hoover, to communicate with other people, to chat, to jump into the different forums. If you haven't seen, there are virtual meetups that are being planned. You should jump into some of those. I highly encourage you to do so. This is not something that we just want to be a one and done. We want you to make connections. We want you to continue to grow your circle of influence and to continue to collaborate with other agencies and their staff. So this is time just for you. We will see you back here at 2 o'clock. We can't wait to continue to learn and grow with you on this day. Take care.